All right. So once again, we are back with another one. What a great event back in UFC 299, right? Really great event. On top of that, we got even more great events to look forward to as time goes on, especially this week. We have Tai Tuivasa taking on Myson Tybura. And in a week after that, March 23rd, you have Rebus taking on Nama Yunus. And in the Atlantic City card of March 30th, you have Erin Blanchfield, one of the top prospects right now in her division, taking on Manon Ferrut. And then a week before UFC 300, which is the countdown to this whole entire thing, it's Marvin Vittori taking on another top prospect in Brendan Allen. And then after that particular week of April 6th, obviously it's going to be Eid right after Ramadan, somewhere in between April 10th, 11th, or something like that. And then a couple of days later, what do we have? We got UFC 300 with Jamal Hill taking on the current undisputed 205 champion of the world, Alex Pereira. So let's go back to the Tai Tuivasa card in particular, right? So we went over UFC 299, great event, a lot of shocking results, especially the Almeida fight. I was really shocked by the Peter Yan fight. It was great because you wanted Peter Yan to win, but at the same time, you wanted Song Yadong to get up there in the ranks and see how he would fare against these other guys. But it's a meritocracy by the end of the day, and to the best man, it will always win. And none other than Peter Yan was able to do that. So Gilbert Burns against Jack Della Maddalena. It was literally everything that I had anticipated. Now Michael Venom Page has finally made his debut in the UFC after that Undertaker entrance that he had going on. Now that right there was just absolute bombshell of entertainment package altogether. And then Dustin Poirier proved once again why he is the top dog of the 155 division, but also one of the top dogs to have never becoming champion. But guess what? Now he has an opportunity to perhaps take on Islam Makhachev somewhere in June. But only time will tell if this particular fight is going to happen. But for now, let's take a look at and concentrate on the fights that we know are definitely going to happen. For example, we have Tai Tuivasa taking on Myson Tybura. And then in the co-main event of that, you have Brian Battle taking on Ange Lusa. Then you have OSP, Ovens St. Preux, taking on Kennedy Njenchu, Christian Rodriguez, Isaac Dulgarin, sorry. And then Pan Kianza taking on Macy Chazon. Gerald Mershot, how about this, taking on Brian Barberena? And that is the main card for Tai Tuivasa versus Myson Tybura. Great heavyweight matchup, right? We're going to see where these two fare in the current landscape of the heavyweight division in the current moment of time. So an interesting one to take a look out for, right? In that same card, you have Nathan Levy taking on Mike Davis, a whole bunch of other names that we're going to get through right away. Joshua Kalibau, how about this? He's in there with Dan Silva. Tiago Moises taking on Mitch Ramirez. Rafael Filo taking on Odie Osborne. Now, how about that? Odie Osborne's still in there. Jacqueline Amorian taking on Corey McKenna. By the way, the Welsh fighter who trains out here in Sacramento. Then you have Chad Angulaher taking on Chara Lampus Jigario. Okay, so I guess that's how it's pronounced. So please excuse me if I got it wrong. And then the next week after that, you have Amanda Hebos taking on Rose Namajunas. And then a week after that, you have Erin Blanchfield taking on Manon Marut. And then obviously Marvin Vittori and Brendan Allen. And then the great, highly anticipated UFC 300, though a bit lackluster with the sentiments that a lot of people have had for this particular card. But nonetheless, we're going to get to all that. We're going to take a look at all the top marquee matchups from UFC 300, its main card, you have Zhang Weili taking on Yan Xiaoman. Now, what I thought about this fight, as I have mentioned, I thought this would have been a lot more appropriate for a card in China or maybe a Singapore card somewhere down the line. But obviously, they had to get this fight going and rolling. And here we are. They are the co-main event. It is what it is. Not exactly the most appealing for the magnitude of a 300 card, but nonetheless, you sort of make up for it when you have Justin Gaethje taking on Max Holloway. By the way, it's a title fight for the BMF card, for the BMF title. How about this? Charles Oliveira taking on Arman Tsarukyan. Basically a battle of a former champion and an upcoming contender, a really tough contender in Arman Tsarukyan. A guy in Arman Tsarukyan who has given Islam Makhachev some of the toughest fight of his career, and that was his UFC debut was to fight Islam Makhachev. Can you imagine? Can you imagine that his debut was against Islam Makhachev, went all 3 rounds by a decision, lost, but then came and made a great account of himself in his overall UFC career thus far, and perhaps maybe ending it with a title shot against Islam. That is, if Islam doesn't fight Dustin Poirier or gets through Dustin Poirier, and then Arman Tsarukyan gets through this one. But only time will tell. And then Charles Oliveira, of course, wants to prove why he is a former champion and a main staple in this particular division. Jiri Prochazka taking on Alexander Rakic. Now, that's interesting. So a couple interesting things about Alexander Rakic. For those of you that don't know, he got into a street fight with former opponent and former UFC vet, UK's own Jimmy Manoa. And I believe it was during a UFC London card where he sucker punched him, where Jimmy Manoa was a guest. And yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Obviously, Jiri Prochazka coming off of his loss against Alex Pereira, sitting at number 2 in the light heavyweight division, looking to prove himself against a rising contender in that division in Alexander Rakic, who's now sitting at number 5. Now, how about this? Great opening card for the pay-per-view. You got Aljamain Sterling making his bantamweight debut, obviously featherweight debut, number 1 at bantamweight, taking on a number 8 Calvin Kattar. I think this is brilliant matchmaking in terms of trying to test Aljamain Sterling within a top 10 range, but also not sort of an overkill. You see, if you put Aljamain Sterling in there right now with, let's say, Volkanovski, I don't know if I would really give him all the chances in the world to be able to win a fight like that. At least I don't think that he can. But either way, Calvin Kattar is a good matchup. He's big. He's tough. He's going to be a great test for Aljamain Sterling. He's not just going to lay down for him easily. But at the same time, Aljamain Sterling is an elite level fighter, and we're going to see how that translates in a higher weight class, especially when he's been dying. Every fight that he's fought at bantamweight, really just draining himself, and we're going to see the different type of performance that he has when he's fully hydrated and can have a few more meals than usual leading up to a fight. So obviously, before that, these are the cards that are going to lead us into the last 3 weeks. Vettori, Allen, and the last 2 weeks, rather. This is basically the fight week. So once the April 6th card is over, it's on to the fight week of UFC 300. And then obviously before that, the first 3 cards that we're going to have for the next 3 weeks, Tai Tuivasa this week, Ribas Namajunas the next week, and then the Atlantic City card for the last event of March. So that's what we have going on for these particular events. So let's go back to this week, okay, with Myson Tybura. What is this? Myson Tybura and Tai Tuivasa right here. Okay, let's take a look at this. So what we got right here, Brian Battle and Ange Lusa. So let's take a look at Tai Tuivasa and a Myson Tybura card, or maybe we could just start straight from the bottom. But again, I'm going to give you full disclosure. I don't go and research all these guys in the prelims, but if I do know them, I'm going to try to give you the best take that I can based on what I understand and know about them, especially right here with Josh Kalibau. I could tell you a lot about Josh Kalibau. I could tell you a lot about Corey McKenna. Obviously, she trains out here in Sacramento. I can't tell you too much about Charlampos Girurgo or Chad Angler. But we're going to try and research and see what we can, because obviously that's not my forte here. But I think that it is interesting to go through the entire 5 card leading up to UFC 300 and looking at all the fights that we have from this month until next month, and the fights that the UFC is going to hold basically for the next 2 months. So let's start from the very beginning. Okay, Charalapos Girardo. Let's take a look at this matchup. What do we have here? 8-3 versus 12-7. Usually a common record that you see in the prelims. 135 pounds. This is at bantamweight division, both at 5'6", 5'5". Reach is a little bit on the Charlampos side. So let's take a look at Charlampos, or Charlemagne, or however you want to pronounce his name. Let's take a look at his status here, okay? The ever-trusted Tapology, right? Because if these guys don't have a Wikipedia page, you can always trust Tapology. So there he is right here, 31 years old, currently at 118 out of the bantamweights worldwide. Now, this is what I like about Tapology, right? They really give you are very detailed information based on their rankings. Okay, so take a look at this. The man is number 13 in the USA Northwest, 97 in the United States, 4 in Pennsylvania. So again, very detailed in the way that they break things down, right? So he was obviously a Dana White Contender Series vet. He's also a vet of the CFFC organization. Let's see. So in the Contender Series, he had a win, ground and pound punch over Cameron Smotherian. And he's won via leg kicks before. And this was in the 5th round. So this man has championship experience. He's also taken on Joey. Okay, none of these names you know, obviously, unless you're a real hardcore fan aficionado that follows the regional scenes, right? So what do we know about this guy so far? He is well-rounded. He's been through 5 rounds. He's got great leg kicks. He's obviously got devastating ground and pound finish from his last outing. And he was born in Cyprus, which, by the way, is a very interesting part of the world. And then he's also affiliated with Longo and Weidman. And by the way, Weidman down the road is going to be fighting somewhere in one of these cards that we are about to preview. So let's take a look at Chad. Okay, 37 years old, Chad at 135. I already don't like the looks of that, because obviously at 35, well, you're going to be facing a whole lot of different challenges just based on the age factor in that particular weight category. Historically, not the best. So his last outing back in November against Jose Johnson got rear naked choked. Diaz versus Ferguson. Okay, I remember that card. He lost by unanimous decision. And he was also a Dana White Contender Series vet. Had a split decision within 3 rounds, but then Dana White decided to give him a contract. And then he comes in there, makes his UFC debut, or his real UFC debut, against Jesse Strader, gets a 3rd round knockout. So to be honest with you, I'm going to have to go with Charles here. Okay, this is the guy that I'm going to have to go with. Why? Well, for the simple fact that this is a guy that has had championship experience. I think that goes a long way. I think the momentum of Chad is really just going to affect him as a result going into this fight. So I'm going to give it to Charlotte Post in this one. Again, sorry if I bastardize his name in any capacity, but yeah, sorry about that. Either way, let's take a look at the next coming fight after this. So yeah, I'm gonna go with Chad. No, I'm not Chad. Charlemagne in that one. Jacqueline Amorium taking on Corey McKenna. So I'm gonna go with Corey McKenna on this one. Obviously, this is a strawweight fight. Let's take a look at Corey McKenna's last fight that she's had, 8-2, good record for the career that she's currently in. Obviously, affiliated with Team Alpha Male, as I've mentioned, out here in Sacramento. Last fight, she won by decision. Before that, got a choke, Von Flue choke. And her opponent, Jacqueline, great record, 7-1. So this may look like a very tough matchup for her. 7-1 from Brazil, 28 years old, America top team. So two good teams here that are facing each other. Had a loss against Sam Hughes back in UFC 287, and recently a ground and pound win over Monstrat Conejo Ruiz. And that was her only loss, was a unanimous decision. I tell you what, this is going to be a very tough matchup. I'm going to go with a decision on her right here, Jacqueline. I'm going to go with Jacqueline by decision on this one. Next matchup. What do we got here? Next matchup. So the next matchup that we have is Joshua Kalibau and Danny Silva. So what's interesting about this fight with Josh Kalibau and Dan Silva? So Dan Silva's got a very good record, right? Josh Kalibau is one of those guys that is deceptive in how well-rounded he is, right? In other words, he's been in there with guys that are former Muay Thai champions, but look like a Muay Thai champion himself. Now, that's what I know so much about Danny. That's what I know about Joshua Kalibau. Now, I don't know much about Danny Silva. Let's take a look at Danny Silva and learn as we go, as we are taking a look at who this guy is. Obviously, there's no Wikipedia on him, so we're going to go with the trusted Tapology to sort of take a look at where this guy is at. El Puma is his nickname. 27 years old, fights out of a UFC gym in Costa Mesa. Okay. So obviously, we don't know too much about the kind of training partners he has. He is a Dana White Contender Series veteran with one fight. So this is basically his true UFC debut, and he is an LFA veteran. He's only really lost once by a majority decision. So, man, I tell you what, I'm going to have to go with Josh Kalibau on this by a decision. And again, that's not a guarantee, but I don't see these two guys finishing each other. It's going to be a very technical affair, especially on the feet. Let's take a look at what El Puma likes to do here in terms of his record. Okay, so what does he like to do the most in terms of what he can do? So he's had 5 wins by knockouts, no submission, usually wins by a decision, if not a knockout, no submission. So, okay, so he's not going to submit Josh Kalibau, but he's also not going to finish him either, which means I think that Josh really has underrated striking, right? I could see Josh really pumping the jabs and hitting him with some leg kicks in this one and winning it that way. So I'm going to go with Josh Kalibau by decision on this one. Next up, who do we have here? Ooh. All right. So after Josh Kalibau, you have Thiago Moises taking on Mitch Ramirez. Mitch Ramirez at 8-1 right now. Oh, hold on. All right. Tiago Moises and Mitch Ramirez. Let's take a look at Mitch Ramirez, the fight stalker. What an interesting name. 8-1, good record. Looks like one of these. So he's number two. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, right? Among the lightweights, he's number 18 in the United States, number one in Utah, number two in Nevada, and number two in the Western Hemisphere of the United States, which, by the way, is not an easy task. So again, this is a guy to look out for. Look at this: 5 knockouts, 2 submissions, 1 win by decision. So this guy doesn't go to the scorecards much. Now let's take a look at Tiago Moises as a result. So veteran, 17-7 in his whole entire career. America top team affiliate. 6 wins in the UFC, 1 in the LFA, 1 in the Contender Series. Just recently lost against Benoit Saint Denis. By the way, a very devastating knockout. Okay, that was back in September, I believe. Yeah, September. So, yeah, I'm going to go with the other guy, right? I think that he may have been damaged. And then on top of that, just look at the statistics on this guy, right? There's a reason why he is number two in the Western Pacific front, right? And he's number two in Nevada. That's not an easy task. Number one in Utah and number 18 in the United States. And we have a lot of great fighters in the United States, sometimes way too many. I can see this guy really outclassing him just based on that experience alone. And then look, this guy is a knockout artist. He knows how to submit you. His only loss was, well, straight left against Carlos Prates. Okay. But other than that, yeah, he's quite a well-rounded guy and very well decorated in the regional scene. I'm going to go with Mitch Ramirez on this one by just those statistics alone. I mean, the statistics like that don't lie. And again, this is why I say that topology is really useful in this particular instance, right? So next card up, Christian Rodriguez. Jafil Fillo against Audie Osborne. So what do we know about Audie Osborne, right? The Jamaican sensation, right? He's been in the UFC now for quite some time, probably a recognizable name. Has recently lost against Asu Ambliev by rear naked choke. Lost to Charles Johnson by split decision. Tyson Nam knocked him out. Manel Kape has also beaten him by a flying knee. He's been finished. He's been choked. So this is a guy that's, well, I guess if you fight enough top competition, right? Eventually you're going to get finished and you're going to get finished multiple times. Now let's take a look at his opponent, Jafil Fillo. What do we know about this guy? The Pastor, as he is named. Okay, affiliated out of the Nova União camp in Brazil, Bahia, Brazil, to be exact. Flyweight. Has number 32 in the world rankings. Okay, so that's something really interesting to know. Obviously, has fought in the Contender Series, has lost to Makayev by rear naked choke. Luis Mateus, he's lost to him by rear naked choke as well. Bruno Correa, he's lost to him by a decision, and that was back in Chuto Box, Brazil. I can see this fight going to well, you know what? These are two guys that are kill or be killed fighters. I'm going to go out of the limb and go with Audie Osborne on this one, just based on a knockout. Okay, that's how we're going to predict that one. Osborne by knockout, because I don't know, man. I'm not giving you any rational reasons why I think Audie's going to win. I just have this feeling that he will, right? Now, on paper, it just seems like Jafil probably seems like the better fighter, or is he? But you never know until the night comes. But I don't know. I just have a feeling that Audie Osborne is going to get this one. So Chelsea Chandler versus Joanne Nunez, 30 years old, 135 pounds. What do we know about these ladies here? Josie, 10-1, is affiliated with Muay Thai Strikers House. Okay, so that's interesting. Already has 3 wins in the UFC. Ultimately, really undefeated in the UFC. The only loss that she's had was outside of the UFC, and that was against Talia Santos. And then Chelsea Chandler. What do we know about Chelsea Chandler? So Chelsea Chandler, okay, so she has a Wikipedia page, but we'll go with the Tapology just for the sake of it all. So let's see. Norma Dumont loses by a decision. Julia Strolanko. Okay. So let's see. Has never really been knocked out. So only losses that she's had was by a decision. So I'm going to see that this is going to be a decision as well, but I'm going to have to give that one to the Brazilian by a close split decision. So that's how I'm going to see that fight going. I think that's going to be a close split decision right there. And the next one after that, Nathan Levy versus Mike Davis. So what do we know about Mike Davis? Right here, Mike Davis. Tapology. Beast Boy, Mike Davis, 10-2. What is his affiliation? Fusion XL Performance. Okay, born out of South Cairo, New York. Fusion XL is his so has 1 submission loss, 1 decision loss, 3-0, 3-1 in the UFC right now. So this is going to be his 5th fight. Wow. Okay, so he's got a win over Vishalov Borishev, and then Mason Jones has a win over him. Okay, so these are good names that he's got a win over. Against Nathan Levy. So what do we know about Nathan Levy? Nathan Levy. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to go with Mike Davis on this one. Mike Davis is going to win this one, I believe. Let's take a look at the last loss that Nathan Levy has for us to kind of get an idea of what we are dealing with here. But I'm going to go with Mike Davis on this one. I just have a good feeling that Mike Davis is going to outclass him in this one. Look at this guy right here with the old school traditional black belt and whatnot. Number 74 in the world rankings, doesn't really have a regional ranking. I think he fights out of Israel. Has 1 win in the Contender Series. So let's see here. These are all the council bouts that he's had going on. Up until now, it's confirmed to fight Mike Davis. His only loss was a decision loss. So this is a guy that's very hard to finish, and he's never really been finished in the amateurs. So I'm going to go with Mike Davis by split decision on this one. So I think you're going to see a lot of split decisions in this fight, but that's what happens when you have some of the highest level of guys competing against each other, right? So let's see here. Next one. So I believe that concludes the prelims for that one. Now with the main card, let's see. We have Gerald Mershad. Oops. What is it? Yeah, Gerald Mershad versus Brian Barberena. I'm going to go with Gerald Mershad on this one. Gerald Mershad just seems to be improving a lot. So, yeah, I'm going to have to go with him on this one. And then next one after that, you have Christian Rodriguez versus Isaac Durango. I'm going to go with the undefeated guy, Isaac, on this one. And then after that, you have Ovince St. Preux taking on Kennedy Njochuk. I'm going to go with Ovince St. Preux in this one. Sometimes Ovince St. Preux can be very negative in the way that he fights. And what I mean by that is he's very slow in the way that he approaches a fight, but oftentimes it works, right? And he's done that with John Jones. I think that experience alone is going to take him. But at the same time, don't be surprised if Kennedy knocks him out. Brian Battle in the co-main event against Ange Lusa. I'm going to go with Ange Lusa on that one. I mean, this guy right here, he looks strong and just really aggressive. On top of that, let's take a look at the Last Ninja. Okay, so current welterweight ranking is 55 in the whole entire world. Okay, it's 5 wins, no losses by terms of TKO at least. Yeah, 5 wins by knockout. Only losses he's had was a decision. So this is a guy that's hard to finish. Yeah, I can see him finishing Brian Battle at this point right here. So now on to the main event of this one. We have Tai Tuivasa taking on Myson Tybura. This is going to be a tough matchup, but I think that Tai Tuivasa just has real deceptive power, and this is going to come into play. Myson Tybura has made plenty of mistakes before in his fights, especially with Tom Aspinall and some of his other past losses. Now, it doesn't say, not to say that Ty doesn't make mistakes either, but I think that he has the power to literally neutralize everything when it comes down to it. So I'm going to go with Tai Tuivasa by first to second round knockout. So now we're going to move on to the Amanda Ribas versus Rose Namajunas card. If you could just excuse me for a second, I have to get a charger for my laptop so it doesn't die on me. Stay tuned. Hold on just a second, and we'll get to the Amanda Ribas fight and that whole entire card and so on and so forth. Be right back. Hold on just a second. All right, so we're plugged in now. Okay, perfect. So let's get on with the Amanda Ribas Rose Namajunas card. I'm gonna I'm gonna just go straight off the bat with the main event. I'm gonna go with Rose Namajunas on this one, based on the fact that she just has great elusive footwork and movement. Uh, Amanda Ribas hasn't really been in that championship level yet. And I think Rose's experience on the championship level, being able to knock somebody out in the first round, but also go with the 5 rounds, is really going to do her justice on this one. Amanda Ribas, even though her record is very similar to the experience of Rose Namajunas, I just think that Rose Namajunas has been in more elite fights than she has. So, how about this? The co-main event, very interesting. The training partner of Dricus du Plessis, Cameron Simon, right? Bantamweight, taking on Peyton Talbot. Now, what do we know about Peyton Talbot? We know that Cameron Simon's very well rounded, but Peyton Talbot is undefeated. Uh, but what kind of person are we dealing with here? Okay, so from the Reno Academy of Combat. Okay, I'm very familiar with this particular gym and organization. They also throw fights in that particular organization, organization that I've fought in, by the way, Reno Combat Championships. So that's going to be interesting. So one fight in the UFC. Let's see, has a rear naked choke over. Oh, wow. This is going to be a good matchup. I just think that, yeah, I think Cameron Simon is going to win this one. And by the way, sometimes I don't have a technical reason as to why I'm picking a certain specific fighter, right? I just think that this is one of those situations where I think that the type of environment that, let's say, Cameron Simon and Dricus du Plessis train under, right? It's very rigorous, very tough. And then on top of that, I mean, you're talking about high heat and in high elevation. So you're basically talking about a team that's got a great lung capacity, which translates to cardio. Now, if this goes into later rounds, I could see Cameron Simon pushing a whole lot harder than Peyton Talbot. Oh, also, Reno does have some sort of a little bit of some high elevation as well, but not the type of high elevation that Cameron Simon has in his hometown in South Africa. So moving on from that card, we have here Billy Quintrello taking on Gabriel Miranda. So what do we know about Gabriel Miranda here? Gabriel Fly Miranda. This is what we have on him so far. So he's beaten Shane Young by rear naked choke, has lost to Benoit Saint Denis. So no shame in that, obviously. And his opponent, let's see here. So his opponent here, Billy Quintrello. Let's take a look at some things about Billy Quintrello here. Okay. So he is from the Gracie Tampa South team. Okay, so he's had a few fight of the night with Gabriel Benitez, performance of the night against Alexander Hernandez, former King of the Cage champion, has a win over Damon Jackson in his last outing in August, lost to Edson Barbosa by knee. I tell you what, man, I'm going to have to go with Gabriel Miranda on this one. I think he gets a finish in this one. So, yeah, that's how we on it. That's how I see that fight playing out. Next one. Let's see here. Next one. Fernando Padilla taking on Luis Pajolo. I'm going to go with Luis Pajolo on that one. At the 145 division on this one, Corazon de Leon. So basically, heart of a lion, right? Which probably translates in the way that he fights, right? 7 KOs, has never been KO'd, only 1 decision loss, and that was against Mike Davison back in Brazil. Whereas his opponent, right here, Fernando Padilla. What do we know about Fernando Padilla? Also, Mexican fighter, fighting out of what gym does this guy fight out of? Let's see here. Doesn't really have an affiliation. Pro Athletes, yeah, not a very known gym. Has a loss against Kyle Nelson in his last fight. Has another decision loss against Spike Carlisle. So 5 decision losses, 2 wins. I'm going to go with the other guy. Yeah, I'm going to go with the other guy. Luis Pajejo on this one. Yeah. Probably by decision. Fernando Padilla doesn't seem to really cut it when it comes to decision. Yeah, I'm going to go with Luis on that one. What else? Carl Williams against Junior Tafa. That one was canceled. Edmund Shabazian was supposed to be in this card against Dusko Radovic. Yeah, that would have been a good fight, but that's unfortunate. So Kurt Holobaugh taking on Trey Ogden. I'm going to go with Kurt on that one by decision. Ricardo Ramos taking on Julian Erosa. I think Julian Erosa is going to get An upset in this one, probably by rear naked choke. Steve Nguyen taking on Jarno Ernest. I'm going to go with Steve Nguyen. Just has a better record. Jarno, let's take a look at some of his last fights leading up to this contest. Uh, Team Thrive in Center. So he fights out of Holland. Okay. Hasn't had a win in the UFC yet. Yeah, exactly. So my my prediction stands on that one. Steven Nguyen, let's take a look at some of his past fights. Steve Nguyen, the Ninja. Okay, AJ Cunningham from his last fight. So he's been in the Dana White's Contender Series a few times, has lost against Alan Cruz, came back after the LFA card where he was in the LFA 100. Though, so that was probably a big card, right? Because obviously the 100 cards are always get big, the hundreds, the 200s, 300s, etc. And then Dana White's Contender Series, he got a decision, couldn't get signed yet. After that AJ Cunningham fight, you're like, come on, let's go. So once again, you'll see a common thread with a lot of these guys basically being part of the Dana White's Contender Series alumni of some sort, as sort of a testing ground in a way, right? So what else is in here? Monstrat Rendon taking on Daria Zalofia. I'm going to go with Monstrat on this one. How about this? Muhammad Usman taking on Mick Parkin. Now, this right here, this is an interesting heavyweight matchup. For those of you that don't know who Mick Parkin is, let me explain to you. He is the training partner of Tom Aspinall. And obviously, Muhammad Usman is the brother of Kamaru Usman. That's going to be a good fight. I see this going to a decision. I don't see any, because these two guys are just really, they're underrated in a way that they are elite and nobody knows it yet, because obviously it's Usman's brother, so he's going to pick off his brain. And then on top of that, Mick Parkin, he trains with Tom Aspinall and what was that guy's name? The Phil DeFries, the one who's the, I believe, the KSW champion. So he's got a lot of good heavyweights to train with. So yeah, man, don't be surprised. Julia Polastri taking on Stephanie Luciano. I'm going to go with Stephanie Luciano in this one. Let's take a look at some of her past fights. Five and one from Brazil. 24 years old, currently ranked number 79 in the whole world, 28 in Brazil, 19 in the southeast region of Brazil. Very interesting statistics, right? Imagine you could just spew this out and say, look at this. So she's got one draw from the Contender Series, but they're bringing her in here probably because they needed a card to get filled up. So I'm gonna have to go with Julia Polastri on this one. Okay, let's take a look at her number one in Nevada. Okay, so yeah, we're definitely gonna go with her on this one, right? Rear naked choke in her last fight. And then before that, an arm triangle choke. Yeah, she's going to submit this girl probably in the first round. Don't be surprised. So that right there concludes the Amanda Hebas versus Nama Yunus card. Now let's take a look at Blanchfield taking on, let's see, Blanchfield taking on Manon Farut. Both 12 and 1, 11 and 1. I'm going to go with Erin Blanchfield on this one, right? The performance that she put on against Molly McCann showed me that not only is she a technical fighter, but she can deal with hyper aggressive fighters. Now, Manon is one of those fighters that sort of waits to get cooking as the rounds go on and sort of, I guess, is a slow starter for a better way to put it. Erin Blanchfield is just going to blow her out of the waters in this one. I know they have equal records and whatnot, but I think there's just going to be a skill deficiency here that Manon Farut is not going to manage. against Erin Blanchfield as a result. So, yeah, I don't see her winning this one. And then Chris Weidman, how about this taking on Bruno Silva? I'm sorry to say, I'm going to go with Bruno Silva on this one. Now, why? Why am I going to go with Bruno Silva? I just think that Chris Weidman is, I think it's done for him right now, right? I just think that he's taken a lot of damage and then he's coming off of that leg injury. Yeah, I think that Bruno Silva is going to beat Chris Weidman here. This is one of those circumstances where in most years prior, Bruno Silva wouldn't have a chance against Chris Weidman. Bruno Silva by knockout. Next one, Alonzo Menifield taking on Carlos Ulberg. I'm going to go with Carlos Ulberg on this one. Seems to be getting his stride in, seems to be a very dangerous guy in the light heavyweight division. And then on top of that, he trains with Izzy and Volkanovski. He's going to outstrike him in this fight. Ibu Asian taking on Anton Turalov. If you guys remember, this guy had the nickname Mr. Pleasure Man or something like that. Yeah, he had that 205 fight against who was that against? He had fought Anton the Pleasure Man. Who was the last guy that he fought that he got slept in right here? Let's see. That was against Tyson Pedro. So now Tyson Pedro, ironically, isn't even in the UFC anymore. So that's not good. That's, yeah, I'm going to go with Ibu Asian on this one, right? What an interesting name. His name is Ibu Asian. His last name is Asian or Aslan. Sorry. I'm so sorry. It's Ibu Aslan. Sorry. I didn't see the. Okay. Well, that's what you get when you're doing live, right? The Last Ottoman is his name. Oh, yeah. I'm definitely going for this guy right here. 12-1. What was his last win? His last win was against Paulo Renato in the Contender Series, and that was by punches. Yeah, he's gonna sleep this guy in the first round, no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. He's gonna sleep this guy in the first round. Angel Pacio taking on Kowloon Lauren. I'm gonna go with Kowloon Rowan on that one. Cheating and Jaconi taking on Reese McKee. Okay, so Reese McKee is a former opponent of Khamzat Chimaev. I'm going to go with Chidi on this one. Lupi Godinez taking on Verna Jandiroba. I'm going to go with Jandiroba on this one. She's got great wrestling. I think she's going to take her down and just smother her all throughout the entire fight. So Verna by decision. Middleweight, Andre Petrosky taking on Jacob Malkoun. I'm going to go with Andre Petrosky on that one by knockout. How about this? This is a good one. Vicente Luque against Joaquin Buckley. Now, I'm going to go with Joaquin Buckley on this one. Vicente Luque is a very, very, well, how do I say this? Sloppy. Let's just put it like that. Very sloppy, but very reckless fighter, right? He's basically a crash test dummy. And with Joaquin Buckley, he knows how to really hone down his skills like a sniper. I think he's going to take him out in this one. How about this? Cedricus Dumas taking on Nusralan Ruzabikov. I'm going to go with Nusralan Ruzabikov in this one, even though Cedric Dumas has the better record. How about this? Kyle Nelson taking on Billy Agello. I'm going to go with Kyle Nelson on this one by decision. Julio Arce taking on Herbert Burns, the brother of Gilbert Burns. I'm going to go with Herbert Burns by a third round TKO stoppage. Connor Matthews taking on Dennis Bazuchka in the featherweight division. I'm going to go with Connor Matthews by decision. Women's flyweight, Victoria Duvagoka taking on Melissa Gatto. I'm going to go with Victoria Dugakova on this one. She's on a hot streak, and the momentum is going to be on her side as a result. Nate Landwehr taking on Jamal Emmers. I'm going to go with Nate Landwehr by first or second round knockout, and another great Mike post-fight speech he's going to make just like last time. And I urge you guys to take a look at that if you guys see it somewhere down the road. And yeah, that is all for this particular fight in the Erin Blanchfield versus Ferrot card. Now, the week before UFC 300. Okay, what do we have? Vitor Vittori versus Brandon Allen. Straight off the bat, I'm going with Brandon Allen on this one. I just think that Marvin Vittori can sometimes be a very sloppy fighter, whereas Brendan Allen is really honing down his striking skills. On top of that, he's training with Dustin Poirier. That should do him some good. In the co-main event, you have Morgan Charrier taking on Choi Yon Sun. Now, Morgan, from what I understand, is a former Cage Rage champion from France. Okay? The last pirate, as they call him, right? So, Cage Warriors, yeah. Cage Warriors veteran, has wins over Pedro Souza, Diego Silva, Manolo Zaneski in his UFC debut. And now he's taken on Chepe Mariscal in this one. Is that who he's taken on? Is that right? Okay. So, yeah, wow, okay. I'm gonna go with Morgan on this one. He seems to have a lot of championship experience in Cage Warriors. By the way, it's a great platform to really get you ready for the UFC, and he has that kind of caliber. I'm going to go with Morgan on that particular fight. So moving on to the card. Let's see here. Norma Dumont taking on Jermaine Durandamy. Okay, how about that? I'm going to go with Jermaine Durandamy based on her knockout prowess, on top of that, her striking prowess. So we haven't seen her in a while. Obviously, a Dutch police officer, also a kickboxer, has a bout against a man and knocked him out in a boxing match. So you're going to go with that one. Cynthia Cavilla taking on Piera Rodriguez. I'm going to go with Piera Rodriguez on that one. Melissa Dixon taking on Nora Connolly. I'm going to go with Melissa Dixon by a decision. Alan Hacheli taking on Victor Hugo. I'm going to have to go with Victor Hugo in that one. Jose Johnson taking on Lucas Roca in the flyweight division. So Lucas Roca, 17-1, 23 years old. Let's see, take a look at his last fights here. So LFA champion. Okay, so he's coming off the Dana White Contender Series. Yeah, we're going to go with him. Loca Rocha in that one. Let's see, who else? Trevor Peak taking on Charlie Campbell. I'm going to go with Trevor Peak on that one. I think he's going to knock him out. Alex Hernandez taking on Damon Jackson. I think Alex Hernandez has had way tougher competition, has lost to some tougher competition, such as Donald Cerrone. I don't know, man. You know what? I'll go with Damon Jackson on this one by knockout. I think he forces Alex Hernandez to make a mistake, and out he goes. Cesar Almeida taking on Josh Friend. I'm going to go with Cesar Almeida. He's undefeated. He's on a hot streak. Although, is it his UFC debut? More than likely, it could be his UFC debut here. Yeah, it is, because he's coming off the Contender Series. So a lot of guys, again, common theme. These guys are coming off of the Contender Series, and Josh Friend he's obviously a lot more seasoned, right? So let's take a look at his Tapology page. Who is last? Jamie Pickett. He got a win against Jamie Pickett. Yeah, we may have to go with Josh Friend on this one, even though Cesar Almeida is undefeated. He is inexperienced, and Josh Friend may take advantage of that inexperienced aspect of his game. So, who else? Court McGee taking on Alex Morono. I'm going to go with Alex Morono on that one. I think Court McGee, he's a veteran. He's well-rounded, great wrestling, good striking, everything that you could ask for in a vet fighter. But Alex Morono, I think he's going to have the momentum on his side here. Valter Walker taking on Lucas Bredsky at the heavyweight division. You know what? I'm going to go with Valter Walker. Undefeated is undefeated, and especially at the heavyweight division, that's not an easy thing to do. So I'm going to go with him. Dan Aguirre taking on the undefeated Gene Matsumoto, 14-0. I'm going to go with the Gene Matsumoto 14-0. Ignacio Bahamondes taking on Christos Diagos. I'm going to go with Christos Diagos on that one. This is one of those situations where, you know what, the particular record is quite deceiving, but if you take a look at the career trajectory of Chris Diagos, let's take a look at some of the people that he's fought. Obviously, he's lost against Daniel Zulber back in September by rear naked choke. He's got a win over Ricky Glenn by KO. He's been submitted. He's been knocked out by Armin Sarukian. No harm in that. He's lost to Jakar Close. He's fought Charles Oliveira and got rear naked choke. He's been knocked out. You know what? I'm not going to go with Chris Diagos on this one. I'm going to have to go with Ignacio Bahamondes in this one. So let's take a look at the Chilean right here, right? 3-fight winning streak. Last loss he had was against John McDessie, and that was in 21 by split decision. And before that was a decision loss in the regional scenes. And then before that, obviously, he got submitted. He's been submitted before, but now he sort of learned from. I'm going to go with him on this one by close decision. Yeah, unanimous decision. I think he outstyles him in his whole entire fight. So who else is in this card right here? Angel Pache. Okay, we went over that one. Trevor Peak. Yeah, no, we went over that one. The heavyweight fight. Okay, so yeah, that basically concludes the fight card for Vittori versus Allen. So I know UFC 300 is way long from now. So I'm going to try to give you guys some predictions for each fight for UFC 300 in particular. So the main event we have with Jamal Hill. I'm going to go over just the main card for now, okay? You know what? Maybe I'll just go. Yeah, I'll go over the main card. And then as this fight draws closer, I'm going to give you a full card prediction. But for now, let's go with just the main card, right? So Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill. Now, it's common knowledge that Alex Pereira is supposedly the better striker, right? But to what degree is that true? Well, the truth of that matter is that he is a kickboxing champion. He's knocked out Israel Adesanya, but has been knocked out himself. Now, here's something you guys have to understand, right? Striking in MMA is so much different than striking in kickboxing. And I think this is where Jamal Hill really shines the best. I think that in MMA, you don't have to be a proficient striker or a decorated striker like Alistair Overeem, Izzy, or Alex Pereira, but you just have to be athletic enough for you to be able to work your skills. I'm going to go with Jamal Hill on this one. Weili Zhang versus Yan Johan. I'm going to go with Weili Zhang. She's just way above all these other girls. She's very strong, very powerful, and I wouldn't be surprised if she knocks out Yan in the first 3 rounds and it doesn't make it to the championship rounds. Justin Gaethje against Max Holloway. You know what? I think Justin Gaethje is going to be way too big. He's going to be way too proficient. And then on top of that, he's very tough. Now that he's adding a lot of technical aspects to his game, being a lot more methodical in the way that he approaches his fights, in the way that he showed in the Tony Ferguson fight, I think that's going to translate well against Max Holloway. Even though Max Holloway is very elite, I think this fight goes the 5-round decision to the favor of Justin Gaethje, and I think that he's also going to hit him with some leg kicks as well during this fight, at which point will really take the wheels off of Max Holloway, which again, as I've mentioned over and over again, how let's say you're chasing a car and you want it to slow down. What's the best way to do it? You shoot up the tires. Charles Oliveira versus Armin Sarukian. This is Armin Sarukian's coming out party. There is a reason why Armin Sarukian gave Islam Makhachev the toughest fight of his life in the UFC, as opposed to anybody else, where he just ran through Charles Oliveira with ease. Recently, he ran through Volkanovski with ease. but he didn't run through Armin Sarukian like that. And it was Armin Sarukian's UFC debut. So Armin Sarukian, either by decision where he just pounds out Charles Oliveira and controls him all 3 rounds, or a late stoppage at some point in which it's really going to impress Islam Makhachev and say, hey, you know what? Maybe you deserve some you deserve a title shot for this one right here. So Yuri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. I'm going to go with Yuri Prochazka. Don't let the performance against Alex Pereira fool you in a way that Dustin Poirier's last performance against Justin Gaethje fooled you, and then he went on to starch Benoit Saint-Denis as a result. Hey, this could very well happen in terms of Jiri doing what Jiri does normally, in which that he couldn't do to Alex Pereira, he may be able to do against Alexander Rakic. And in Calvin Kattar versus Aljamain Sterling, I think Aljamain Sterling has enough skills to be able to withstand Calvin Kattar in this particular instance, right? He's number 8. Aljamain Sterling is an elite champion fighter. So I think that's going to translate well in this weight class. And I don't see Aljamain Sterling finishing Calvin Kattar. I can see them being very careful in the way that they fight, being very tentative in the hesitation of throwing the shots, which is going to lend itself to a very technical fight. And then on top of that, I think the knockout that Aljamain Sterling suffered prior, I think will leave him a little bit gun shy as a result. So other fights, you have Bo Nickel against Cody Brundage. That's going to be an easy win for Bo Nickel, no doubt about it. That's going to be an easy win. How about this? Cody Garbrandt versus Davison Figueroa in the first fight. I'm going to go with Cody Garbrandt on that one. Obviously, I'm probably biased because he's trained out here in Sacramento, but I'm going to give it to Cody by decision. Bobby Green against Jim Miller. I'm going to go with Jim Miller by a decision. Jessica Andrade versus Marina Rodriguez. I'm going to go with Jessica Andrade just based on her performance alone. Jalen Turner against Renato Moicano. I'm going to go with Jalen Turner. He's way too big for him. He's going to outstrike him, keep him at distance, and that's going to be that. Holly Holmes against Kayla Harrison. This is Kayla Harrison's coming out party. She's going to smash her easily. Sadiq Youssef against Diego Lopez. This is going to be an easy win for Sadiq Youssef. He's probably going to get a finish any way that he wants to, whether submission or a knockout. This is his fight to win, and Diego Lopez, I think, is just, well, he's got a lot of hype behind him, but I think this is one of those matchups that's going to surprise people right off the bat. But hey, we still got a few more weeks left before UFC 300. I just gave you my first official prediction for all 5 cards that we just went over, right? We literally just went over 5 cards, right? From the Tai Tuivasa Tybura fight that's going on this weekend. Next weekend, Ribas versus Namajunas, Aaron Blanchfield, March 30th, Vittori versus Allen in April 6th, and then the big banger of them all, supposedly, UFC 300, April 13th. Guys, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys soon, inshallah.